Hey guys, Danny Johnson here, and today we're going to fix the oil leak on this Infiniti G35. It's going to be the same for the 350Z and very similar to the Maxima and the other cars with the 3.5 liter or the 3.7 liter. So basically all we're going to do is remove the oil pan and we're going to put this gasket maker around it. And I've done this before. You want to be very careful not to use any brake parts cleaner or anything that will chip the paint that's on the oil pan. Because if you do that, then you have to strip all of it so none of the little flakes come off and go up into the engine. So we're going to make sure that we're careful to just remove the pan and clean it out with just a rag. Okay, next we lifted the car in the air. And so the way we did this was we lifted right here on this beam and we put our jack stand in front of it. So notice we had to put the jack a little farther down so that the jack stand could go here. So just make sure it's securely placed on jack stands. And you can leave the jack there if you want as an extra safety precaution. Okay, next we're going to remove this shield that's underneath there. And so just go around and take out all of the screws that you can find. It is a Phillips or like a 10mm, I believe it was. And so it's better to use the socket so you don't strip them out with a screwdriver. Okay, so here's our oil pan. As you can see, it's leaking all the way around it pretty bad. The good thing is this oil pan has nothing under it, so it's really easy to drop it. We are going to change the oil and drain the oil at this point anyway, so we're taking our 14mm socket and putting it on here. I already broke it loose. And so you want the car to be cooled down so you don't burn yourself. If you're impatient like me, just use a extension here, and that way you won't get burned as you drain the oil, because this car was just barely running. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and drain the oil out and put the plug back in. Okay, we reinstalled our drain plug. Make sure it's tight in case you forget. You don't want it to leak when the car's all put back together. And next we're just taking out all of these 10mm bolts that surround the oil pan. So just go ahead and remove all of those. Okay, you also want to put a bunch of cardboard down and keep this handy, because when we remove this, it's still going to be dripping the entire time. Okay, so we removed all of the bolts and put them in a magnetic tray here. And so here's the key with this. You do not want to bend it, and it bends very easily. Okay, so you're going to want to go around the entire pan with a razor blade like this and try to cut between the pan, so that we're getting that whole layer broken away. Because if you pry on it, it will bend the pan. So we're just going around and doing this as far as we can, as much as we can, just to get in between the oil pan and the bottom of the block. Okay, next we're just taking our flat spade here, just putting it between the seams and giving it a few whacks. Try to do this as evenly as you can. Try not to pry on it too much. You don't want to bend it the best that you can. Okay, so we pounded on this side as well, and now you can see the whole pan is basically loose. So we're just going to very carefully pry it down. But like I said, you don't want to bend the pan, so just be as careful as you can. This is also nice because it's very flat on the top. So I'm doing it like that with the flat end, like that. And then as I'm pounding it in, it's just separating it. But just try not to pry. Okay, then eventually the whole pan will be able to come down. Drain out anything that's left. Okay, so we need to clean the mating surface here and on the car really well. On the car, it's aluminum, so we can do it with a scraper. And you want to be using like a credit card, because the pan here is painted. And so if you start using anything metal like a razor blade and you cut into the paint, you'll have to strip all of the paint out of here, because it'll start to flake. And you don't want it to flake and then get sucked up into the engine and clog up the filler neck and everything. So we're just taking a credit card like this, and we're just getting it as clean as we can. There is a little trough down in here too. So just the edge of the credit card really helps. Okay, but we're just gonna go around like this and just clean it all off. Once again, don't use brake parts cleaner. Don't use anything metal that'll scratch the paint. Okay, it's gonna start to look like this with shreds everywhere. Just keep going until you get everything out of these nooks and crannies. And you'll have all kinds of gasket maker peeling off. So we're gonna get it all out, and then we're gonna take a microfiber and wipe everything out so it's spotless. Okay, so we took our microfiber towel here and wiped this out so it is clean all the way around. Now granted, you might have chipped the paint a little bit with the punch, as long as it's on the far side, because our silicone bead's gonna go right here. So as long as it's on the far side, you should probably be okay. If it's flaking off, you might need to strip all of the paint out. I had to do that last time because I used the brake parts cleaner to try to clean this and it chipped all the paint. So you don't want any flakes coming loose and going up into the engine or anything like that. So now the pan's clean. Now we're just going to go to the bottom of the block of the car and make sure that that mating surface is also clean. Okay, so just like the oil pan, we're going to go around and clean this mating surface, scrape it all off, and make it nice and smooth and clean. Now, unlike the pan, this is not paint, it's just aluminum. So we can scrape it with this, and then you can use whatever else you want to use, brake parts cleaner, anything. Probably use a Scotch pad as well to get it perfectly clean. But we just want to get this nice and smooth. Just get everything off of it. Okay, you can see how clean I got this going all the way around. Perfectly smooth. It does tend to keep leaking a little bit of oil there, which is going to be kind of hard because we don't want the silicone to get oil on it. So we're going to have to wipe it, and hopefully after a while it just stops coming out there. I did use this attachment you can get at Walmart. It's basically just a Scotch pad on a drill, so I was very careful as I went around. But you can still do it by hand. You can use the back side of a sponge that has that same kind of material on it, the Scotch pad type stuff. But now that this is perfectly clean, we're going to dry it off from all the oil, and we're going to apply our silicone to the oil pan. Okay, the pan is perfectly cleaned out. We're going to go ahead and use our ultra black Permatex here. This is great stuff for the oil pan. It has an oil pan right on it. And so we're going to go ahead and just go and put a bead around the whole thing, and you're going to go like this and go on the inside of each of the holes. Okay, so just go around the whole pan, and I'll show you here. There we go, all the way around, one consistent bead, nice and thick. If you want, you can go around each of the holes if you have extra. Doesn't really matter. But anyway, just make sure you go on the inside of the hole for sure. Okay, and I also went around each of the screws as well, just because I had some extra. Laid it on thick at the bottom where we used our punch, because it seemed like it was still pretty flat, but just in case it was bowed a little bit, has a little extra there. But we're going to go ahead and lift it up and tighten them all down. Okay, so you want to make sure it's completely dry here with no oil on it. And one tip, since it was still leaking back here, I slightly pulled down on this little bracket, and that helped it drain out a little more. So now it's dry. We have our nice little window here without anything leaking on it that we're gonna go ahead and lift our pan right up into place. Okay, so just make sure that you have all your bolts ready and get under it. It's good to go directly under the pan so you can look up and see it lining up properly. So we're just going to lift it straight up. Be very careful when you're smashing it together. So at this point, I found it easiest to lay directly under the pan and look through the holes in the pan to line it up with the threads in the block. And so once you get them lined up, put it straight up the best that you can. If you're off by just a little bit, you can slightly move it back and forth, but just try not to be moving it too much so that the seal stays consistent all the way around. Next, thread in all the bolts that you can by hand. We're not going to want them too tight because we have to torque them down in a specific sequence, and we'll show you that right here. Okay, so as you can see for the torque sequence, this is the way you want to do it. So it's going to be on the passenger side first near the oil filter, see where it says number 1, then directly across it, number 2, and then so on and so forth. Now the torque specs are very light, only 12 to 14 foot-pounds, so don't over-tighten them. You don't want to snap anything. Now take a look at this bead that's going all the way around. That's what you want to see. Nice, perfect, consistent bead. Okay, now keep in mind it's also doing that on the inside of the oil pan. So we need this to completely cure before we add oil or do anything. So you're going to let it sit like this for about 24 hours. Okay, so very important, make sure that the drain plug is in tight and add your 5 quarts of oil back in. Okay, then just lift back up on the frame, remove the jack stand, and you're done. So thanks for watching. I have a playlist of everything I've done on this car. I have quite a few videos, so I'll put the link to that in the description. And I'd appreciate it if you please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.